been lovely. Tomorrow I go home. I will take so many happy memories of this place. But my job here this afternoon is to try and convey my passion for words. Now, words can get attention, particularly when coupled with a beautiful tune. And that was perhaps one of my first connections with the power of words. Although I have to say, I probably learnt more about hymn singing in the pubs of London and the bar of the London Welsh Rugby Club than I did singing in chapel. But certainly I find with hymns is when I feel most spiritual. I have quite a complicated relationship with formal religions, and I'm sure many of us do, if we have any kind of relationship with it at all. But having said that, my first connection, the kind of words and music that excited me were not so much the hymns as the pop songs of my youth. They were the things that talked to me. I think particularly of the lyrics of the Jam and Squeeze. You know, they were representing my world. To change the mood a little, I've been posing down a pub. I see in my reflection, I'm looking slightly rough. I fancy this, I fancy that, I want to be so flash. I give a little muscle and I spend a little cash, but all I get is bitter and a nasty little rash. And by the time I'm sober, I've forgotten what I've had. And everybody tells me that it's cool to be a cat. It's cool for cats. Shape up at the disco, and I think I've got a pull. I ask her lots of questions as she hangs onto the wall. I kiss her for the first time, and then I take her home. I'm invited in for coffee, and I give the dog a bone. She likes to go to discos, but she's never on her own. I said, I'll see you later, and I give her some old chat. But it's not like that on the telly when it's Cool for Cats. I was certainly not alone as a young Welsh poet in my interest in rock and roll, and I sang for a while with a band, and I shared a stage many times with a wonderful man who left us far too early, Iwan Llwyd, a bass playing poet who the drink got the better of him. But anyway, Iwan played in many bands. We sang together in one band, and we had a residency in the pub at the corner of my road. And he also played with another band. And after his death, they were busy, so they had to get somebody to fill in for him. And after that first gig, we arranged to meet in a pub in the town without thinking. This was the pub where we used to do the residency with the other band. So it was quite a bittersweet experience. And this is the poem that I wrote in memory of Iwan Llwyd. It's on your sheets of translations. It's called Company. Okay. It's called Company. Gyda'r machlud yn glais uwch yr Eagles, dyna'r noson gyntaf I ni ganu efo chdi. Dan oliadau a ddiferau yn lliwiau anwadal o'r tor, roedd merched mewn ffrocio clybio ar ei ffordd stiletto i'r dre, a gwragedd a'i gwir mewn crysau glân yn crwnio karaoke o'i seti, a phawb yn gwybod geiriau, "Dan ni yma o hyd!" Ond roedd bwlch yn y rhengoedd, a'r gân yn gelwydd I gyd. Ac eithom ragom o dafarn I dafarn a sŵn yr angylion yn hedfan heibion mynydd bylchu pob sgwrs. Dro ar ôl tro a nina'n myd wylio Guinness arall yn setlo. Ceisiasom gofio trydan dy awen, yn llosgi'n llachar yn seada'r nos, cyn pylun anhymig yn llwyd y wawr. Ond, wrth faglu'r bora a'r gwylanod yn gymanfa gwatwarwyr uwch yn penna, roedd dy gân unwaith eto yn rhyban yn y gwynt. dy chwerthin yn atsain drwy'r strydoedd gwag, ath gerdd yn awyren fri, yn sgrif wen ar las y bora newydd, yn daith sy'n ein galw o hyd. I should have explained before launching into that Yuan had this theory, I think he borrowed it from somebody else, but that every time, sometimes in even the most amenable of conversations, sometimes there's just a silence. And his theory was it will always happen at 20 minutes past the hour or 20 minutes to the hour, and it was because the angels were flying past. The angels were flying past. Yuan Llwyd. Well, most of my writing over the years has not been poetry, but rather writing for television. I began my working life as writing scripts for a Welsh language soap opera. It was called Dinas, which means the city, and it was a kind of half-assed attempt to replicate Dallas for Welsh speakers. It was a kind of, one of those kind of shaky wall kind of sets. It wasn't great, but it did enable me to at least earn a modest living as a writer for one of the few times in my life that I've actually managed to do that. So I shouldn't knock it. These days, as a documentary maker, my sort of use of language is either within programs for purposes of voiceovers, perhaps, or to promote the programs. And I have a great admiration for some of the best exponents of that craft. It's a craft that isn't perhaps acknowledged, an art form almost. I think particularly of Winford Vaughan Thomas, who was a wonderful, a curious man. I remember him once when in a pub at lunchtime, because he was of that generation, you had to go to the pub at lunchtime, in the back room of a pub where there was nobody else sitting, and yet the jukebox was blaring out through the speakers. The jukebox was next door, but the speakers were on, and he asked politely, would it be possible to turn the speakers down in the room where we were? And the landlord wasn't interested in helping him out. So in the end, he took his umbrella and he stabbed the cone of the speaker, and then turned to us and said, "I find that quite effective." But he wrote the voiceover for a wonderful short film about Senghenydd. Senghenydd was the village that became known, well, certainly all over Wales and perhaps all over the world in 1913, because it was the site of the worst mining disaster ever, where 439 men, I think, died one morning when the gas exploded, trapped gas exploded in the mine. And 60 years later, a man called John Clark made a documentary film showing some of the widows who was still living in the village. But Winford Vaughan Thomas, who wrote the voiceover, he was trying to describe Senghenydd for people, perhaps you're not familiar with the valleys of Wales. They're very narrow, and the ones of the southeast were the Rhondda is a prime example. The pits would open along the valley floor, and then the houses for the workers had to be found room for, usually along the sides of valleys. And Winford described this wonderfully. The coal owners ran out terraces like so much knitting along the valley side. What a great line. I mean, that's poetry, isn't it? The coal owners ran out terraces like so much knitting along the valley side. Imagine knitting terraced houses. It was but it was such a quick process. They were throwing them up, just like that. So my passion for words has got me to some weird and wonderful places. Perhaps the weirdest job I ever had was writing the stories for Disney magazine, which is based in Denmark. Yeah, Gutenberghus, I think the company was called. I once did an interview with Gareth Bale for Radio Times. That was wonderful. And when I was in school, I once did an interview with Chaz and Dave. Chaz and Dave are they tend to be dismissed because they've done a lot of quite humorous songs, but they are very good musicians, and played with all the greats in the '60s when they were young session musicians before they made their own name as an act. But they tap into a particularly London sensibility, which I found very attractive, having been brought up in London. One song that they sang for us when I'm not sure if they ever recorded it, but when we were doing this interview with them, starstruck teenagers, was this one. Working once down a lunatic asylum, breaking up some stones, when along come a lunatic and said to me, "Good morning, Mr. Jones. How much a week do you get for doing that? 13 bob, I sighed." Well, the old man looked and he scratched his head, and this is what he cried. "Come inside, you silly bugger, come inside. I'd have thought you'd have a bit more sense." Yes, I would. "Working for your living, take my tip. Act a little silly and become a lunatic, and you get your meals quite regular, and 2 new suits each side. 30 bob a week, no wife, no kids to keep. Come inside, you silly bugger, come inside." Ding, 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 ding. Part of my interest in language and my passion for words is obviously has come from being brought up in a bilingual environment. We spoke Welsh at home, and except for when we attended chapel and occasionally you'd meet people at the London Welsh Rugby Club, and there was a London Welsh Social Club as well. But by and large, most of my life outside of those particular spheres was in English. And I think that perhaps makes you question words more when you're constantly sort of switching from one environment into another. I mean, I love the way that different languages do things. My sort of big discovery this week is that the definite article in Swedish goes at the end of the word. Wow! So you have en book, a book, and boeken, the book. So ett hus, a house, huset, the house. Wow, I like that. Because we don't even have an indefinite article in Welsh, so I'm jealous. And this is a novel that I wrote. It's a kind of autobiographical novel. That is to say, pretty much 90% of everything in this book has actually happened to me, but the sort of story, the narrative framework of the book is completely fictional. And it describes lives in London, separated by 10 years. Aled is a London Welshman, kind of standing for me, same age, 18 in 1979. And then 10 years later, there's Eddie. And Eddie's a bit more of a mystery figure. But Aled is a bit of a precocious young man, sort of interested, asking sort of stupid questions all the time. And this is an example of it. I'll speak you a bit in Welsh and then translate it impromptu. Da chi di sylwi? So Aled is his dad is a teacher. His dad is trying to get on with marking his students' work, and Aled is just being a nuisance. He's asking questions all the time, And his dad is not very happy about this. Da chi di sylwi, Dad, fel mae cymaint o sôn yn Gymraeg am ein hwn ac ein llall, ein pobl ifanc, ein hiaith a'n diwylliant, un o'n cantorion mwyaf amryddau ni. Roedd Dad ar ganol marcio traethodau. Nath o'n sbio fyny. Mae mor wahanol i Saesneg, tydi? Young people today, sa ti dweud yn Saesneg, nid young people. Da chi'n meddwl fod o'n gwneud ni swnio possessive, braidd. Mae swnio mor amddiffynol rwsyd. Erbyn hyn, o'n i'n cerdded i gyfynnu a lawr ystafell wrth destio ffinia fy nadl. Da ni mor bring o adnoddau fel bod rhaid sticio rhyw label ar bob dim i'n hatgoffa'n hynna mae'n nibio fo. Gobeithio ddim wir. Ond wrth gwrs, mond trwy gyfrwng Gymraeg mae hyn yn digwydd. Felly, siarad efo ni'n hunan, dyn ni pyn bynnag, a siawns bod ni'n gwybod mae'n iaith ni ydi, am pobl ifanc ni ydyn nhw. Felly, beth yw'r pwynt? Och, neidiodd dad. Dwi'n i'm, Aled. Dwi'n i'm. I'll read the translation now. Have you noticed, Dad, how so much have you noticed that how we talk all the time in Welsh about our this and our that, our young people, our language and culture, one of our most talented singers. Dad was in the middle of marking essays. He didn't look up. It's so different in English, isn't it? Young people today, you'd say in English, not our young people. Don't you think it makes us sound a bit, possessive? It makes us sound, slightly defensive somehow. By now, I was walking up and down the room, testing the boundaries of my argument. So, are we so deficient in resources that we have to stick some kind of label on everything just to remind us that we own it? Well, I hope not. But, of course, we're doing this when we're speaking Welsh. So we know that it's us that we're talking about. And we know that it's our language and they're our young people. So what's the point? Dad sighed. I don't know, Aled. I don't know. So is the idea or the concept of sharing maybe more central to our experience as Welsh people, do you think? And is it perhaps because we had less resources to draw in the first place? And why don't they say that in English, I wonder? One of our most versatile singers, and so on. They don't have to be so possessive somehow. Aled, please! I shut up. One day, I'd like to know how this Welsh us came into being. Yeah, words have long shadows. Words have long shadows, and being brought up in London, we used to eat. I became aware as soon as I went to secondary school that we seemed to be eating our evening meal at a different time to everybody else. All my friends, or when I would sometimes be invited to somebody's house to have food, and they would have dinner at 7. But we had tea at 5. And one day I asked my mother, well, why is this? Why do we have tea at 5? Why are we different to everybody else? And she said, I'm not really sure, because it's what your grandmother did. Well, why did she do it? And she thought about it a bit more. Well, I suppose it was tea was quarry quarry supper, because the men in the quarry, that's when they finished their shift at I think it was 4:30. By the time they walked home and washed, it was 5. Food was on the table. So that was the tradition of my grandmother. She was her father and all her brothers worked in the quarry. But of course, my mother wasn't brought up in a quarrying family. And we certainly weren't in London. So it's interesting that these habits have such as I say, a long shadow. And in a similar way, every time we would make too much of a noise as we were cleaning our plates, or cleaning the bowl, that's what we'd always be talking. Ti'n gweithio chwarae lan. You're not working in the quarry now. So this is on your sheets. It's quarry supper. It's on the back of the sheet, and it's there. Rhyfedd yw archeoleg prydau bwyd. Roedd yn lluniaeth yn Llundain yn fish finger y gyfoes fel y llestr y llion, ond o glirio brig, dinoethi'r graig a saethu holl drwy hyn a hanes, cawsom ein bod yn dal I weithio yr un hen fargan, o ran amser bwyd fodd bynnag. Byddai mam yn ein galw at ein bwrdd suburbaidd am 5, a mae dyna ddisgwylid gan wraig I ddyn trin y graig, ac mae rhai arferion mor wydyn a'r Dutchies a'r Laddies porffor a hebryngwyd o ddyn o'r gynt. Bod ein teulu wedi hen ddiflannu o'i bargian cegin lwgu a heli am Lundan, lle oedd y cerig yn holli fel sidan. Rhyfedd yw archeoleg prydau bwyd. Mae'n 5 eto, Yng Nghaernarfon tro yma, a llwyan canu'n frwd oedd graffu disgyl. Hei, da chi'n mynd gweithio chwarae wan, me fi. Geiriau fy mam yn Llundain ers talwm. Geiriau fy nain yn Fachwen cyn hynny. Geiriau fy hen nain yn Tranås cyn hynny. Creiriau o eiriau sydd wedi para tu hwnt i ddyddiad yng nghyn dada, fy'n troi clytiau yn grawiau a cherig yn fara. Rhyfedd yw archeoleg prydau bwyd. Heno, nôl yn Llundain er gwybod dim am glirio bawn a chodi bona, dwi'n dal i hollti syniadau a'i naddu a'r drafal fy nychymig, am fod rhan ohonau'n llechan las o hyd. Hyd yn oed heno hefo fy ngwallt dosbarth canol am dana'r Beaujolais. Dwi'n dal i deimlo'r llechan yn yng ngwaed. Wrth gythru arferion newydd a'r hen lechan, gwn nad wyf, ond pwyriad a chadach pocad i ffwr o fywyd lot fwy calad. 70 mlynedd a 200 milltir i ffwrdd, sŵn corn chwaral di cau, sy'n ei galw o hyd at y bwrdd. And again, I should have explained to you before we launched into that, a bargain. There are one or two terms there. A bargain is, it comes from the English word bargain. And you can get a bargain in the shop, you get something cheap, but a bargain can also be something, you shake hands with somebody, you make a bargain. And in Welsh it came to mean the letting of a part of the quarry to a team of men. They worked the quarry initially on a kind of piecework basis. So, and then bargain came to mean the men who worked the bargain, the men working on the same bargain, and the actual part of the quarry itself. So in Welsh to this day we still talk about ma' rwbath yn bargain anodd. Something is a difficult bargain. It's a tough proposition, because when the quarry, when the stone would not come from the quarry as fruitfully, as wasn't as productive, then of course they were paid by piece rates. They were paid by what they had won from the face of the rock. And at the end of the month, they didn't, if they hadn't, they could starve. And that's what the famine kitchen bargain is. Bargain kicking lukid. Your bargain is like a famine kitchen. You're not able to make any profit to feed your family. And then duchies and latties are, although these were a totally sort of working class environment, they still called the stones, the different sizes. Latties were the smaller ones, from ladies, English ladies. Duchies were the bigger ones. They were duchesses, and there were queens and counties. Anyway, yeah. Next time we will try. Right now, I'll try and do something difficult. One of the I've mentioned already that I have an interest in language, but I also have an interest in teaching language, and I used to teach classes to Welsh adults a few years ago, and that's what my wife does for a living now. And it was meeting a Jamaican, a Cardiff steelworker of Jamaican origin. That prompted a collection of poems in this book about adults learning Welsh, because his children, he decided he wanted his children to go to a Welsh medium school so they would have their education through the medium of Welsh, all well and good. But unlike many parents in that situation, they just, fair play to them, they make sure their children get something that they don't have. But he wanted to go one step further, and he wanted to make sure that he also learned Welsh. And he's a great guy. So this poem is kind of in his voice, describing him shaving as his young lad watches, and of course his young son, who would have been about 8 at the time, of course was taking to the language much quicker, because of course when we're young, we're sort of hardwired. The brain is receptive to new languages. I think it's neurologically more receptive to language between, I think, the age of 3 and 7, and then of course, it's still possible to learn language after that, but it's clinically, neurologically less easy. So this is a poem about that, and I'm going to do something I used to do a lot of, and I haven't done for a while, so this could all go horribly wrong. Use a backing track. Should have done a sound check. Shafio o blaen fy mab. Gollynais fy rasal a gweld wrth I chodi'n sydyn fy mab yn y bwlyn drws pres. Ei ddwylo'n pelydru fel dau hael, a'i fy syth yn pelydru. Yn I fyd lasfico ni wel angen shafio, mond morgrig ar fy wyneb. Nid yw newid gwlad, ond dysgu can newydd. A newid iaith fel gwisgo vest y bore. Mae o, yn wahanol I mi, heb angen wlpan I newid I vest. Ond, yn y bwlyn drws, mae nefoedd yn bosib I mina hefyd. Cyfanghofio'r bustachu dysgu a throed yn Nghymraeg cloff yn freichio rwbeth yw anwesu. Ar ymyl y sinc shafio, mae diferion sebon strae yn llawn morgryd meirwan. Shaving in front of my son. Now, an Ulpan course is an intensive Welsh course for learning Welsh. But here's the poem. I dropped my razor and saw as I picked it suddenly up, my boy in the brass doorknob. His hands, supplicant like two suns. His fingers, streaming sunbeams. In his elastic world, he sees no need for shaving, just the ants on my face. Changing countries is just learning a new song. Changing languages like wearing his morning vest. He, unlike me, needs no Ulpan course to change his vest. But in the brass doorknob, I too can attain nirvana. Forget the frazzle of language learning, and my halting Welsh becomes a pair of rubber arms that embrace my boy. And at the edge of the shaving sink, the drops of stray lather are full of sloughed off ants. Yeah, well, that was something to celebrate, and that's certainly he then went on to become fluent and is now teaches Welsh in a school in Cardiff. The steelworks closed down. Something else to celebrate is our small tentative steps towards self-determination in Wales. And one of the first jobs I was given as National Poet of Wales was to write a poem to celebrate the opening of the latest session of our National Assembly. And it's on your sheets. It's called This House. And the quote at the beginning from Glyn Thomas, who's a great historian, born in Merthyr, for many years a communist. He then, but also a man, a patriot, and a man with national feeling. And I think this is so true. If we want Wales, we will have to make Wales, and that is, of course, the work of the National Assembly. The last two lines are a proverb that was shared with me by a man from my father's home area. Cynt y cyferdydd, dau ddyn na dau fynydd. Sooner, when you're farewelling with somebody, when you're saying goodbye to somebody, and I don't know when I'm going to see you again, he would say, Cynt y cyferdydd, dau ddyn na dau fynydd. Sooner shall two men meet than two mountains. Anyway, here's the poem. Daeth Gwanwyn yn hwyr i'n gwlad, y gaea wedi cloi ein uchelgais a gwydro ein dyheada, cyn y dadmar mawr, a barodd i'r gwteri garglo a'r landerig a'r lanu. Boed felly hael ar y tŷ hwn heddiw. Dyma bair ein dadeni, a llwyfan ein llais, lle canwn ein gweledigaeth i fodolaeth. A down yma o sawl cwmwd megis cynt, wrth droedio'r llwybr dreiniog cul sydd â gwlan fel trimming stolig ar ei hyd, neu wrth heidio lawr y lôn wleb sy'n ddrych i sglein yr awyr, down yma i gyffwrdd ar gorwel, a'i blygu at i'w sgwlad. Ac wrth fynesu o'n cymoedd a mynyddoedd at ein dinas barhaus, diolchwn nad oes tyllabwledi yn hileru'r tŷ hwn. Dim ond cwmwl tystion wrth ein cefn ym mhob pluraliaeth barn. Ac wrth gael ein tywys i gyntedda'r tŷ, boed angerdd i'n trafod a phwyll ym mhob cymod, boed i anodd ddod yn syml a'r heriol ddod yn hwyl, a boed i ni gofio'r wireb hon beunydd, cynt y cyferlydd dau ddyn na dau fynydd. Thank you. If we can be glad that Wales has won a measure of independence, at least, without shedding blood, of course that's not the story in every country. And the next poem is drawn from a period that I spent in America, researching the history of the Welsh Americans who fought in the American Civil War. And I know there's a great Swedish diaspora in America to this day. I believe that 4 million identify as being of Swedish descent in America. I think there are 2 million Welsh, although I'm sure many more Swedes went to America. The difference being, I think, because the Welsh had been going there for a longer period, then of course they had more descendants because they've been there for longer. And this poem, I'm going to invite my friend Freka up. He's going to read it in Swedish first. It's actually, before Freka comes up, I will just tell sorry, Freka, rather than keep you standing here. This is based on a true story. Before the Battle of Cold Harbor in 1864, a new general was inspecting his troops, and then he came to speak with his fellow generals and said he was very impressed. You know, even on the night before a big battle, how the men were attending to their uniforms and sewing, and he thought this was fantastic. It showed the sort of the superior spirit of the Union troops who were defending defending the North. And one of his other officers explained to him, no, you've got that completely wrong. What they are doing is sewing their names into their coats, because they know they're going to die, and this was a war in which bodies would be taken home for burial. You know, they wanted to be known, so at least they would have something to mark who they were and what they died for.
Föreslaget. Cold Harbor, Virginia, 1864. Natten är fylld av män som vet. Några ber, några skriver hem, några ligger ner redan i ett horisontellt experiment med evigheten. Eldslågorna kastar svavelgula former på soldaterna. Några syr in sina namn i rockarna. För de vet att imorgon fylls fälten med lik.
Cyn-brwydyr, Cold Harbour, Virginia, 1864. Mae'r nos yn llawn dynion. Maen nhw'n gwybod. Rhain gweddio, rhain sgwennu adra. Rhain gorfad yn llorweddol eisoes yn arbrofi ac ebargofiant. Mae llam y fflaman lluchio siapia melyn dros y milwyr. Mae rhain gwniau henwa ar eu cotia. Maen nhw'n gwybod. Y fori bydd y caean llawn cyrff. Before battle, Cold Harbour, Virginia, 1864. The night is full of men. Men who know. Some praying, some writing home, some lying down, horizontal already, experimenting with eternity. The burning of the flames throws sulfur-yellow shapes across the soldiers. Some are sewing their names on their coats because they know that tomorrow corpses will fill the fields. Well, I'm going to close now with a poem to my father. He recently lost a very different battle, but with an unpleasant enemy, motor neuron disease. And but he knew too. Now my first memory, the first memory that I can date with any definitely, was my brother's christening, 3 years younger than me, in Welsh Chapel in London. The same chapel where I was christened myself, the same chapel where my father was christened before me, because he also was brought up in London. And when somebody dies, there's no manual for mourning. There's no blueprint. There's no nobody to tell you how you should feel. And so, because I found it difficult to cry, I wrote a poem about that. It's called Baptism, because of that shared history that we had, Dad, my brother and me. But also because there are two schools, well, at least two schools of thought on baptism. I was baptized in a tradition where one believed that a little sprinkling of water would suffice, a symbolic sprinkling. That was fine, that was enough. But of course, another tradition, I don't know what's the tradition in Sweden. The Baptist tradition is you have to be immersed.
Sprinkling is fine enough here.
Sprinkling is fine, okay. Your sprinklers too. It's fine. Right. Well, certainly the Baptist tradition is to immerse, as they describe it, to bury someone in the faith. You know, literally, they're being buried in the water and then resurrected out of the water. Anyway, this is the poem which I will close with. Bedydd. Dwi'n sgeintio'r arch gan lyncyn nagra I am sgwyddan hyrddion fyd i'r anthem hon. Sawl tro cyd ganon ni Salm 23 cyn chwalu'r gollad dros ym mhen yn don. a'ch claddu yn y ffydd a boddfa iawn o wylo llafar weddai'n well I chi, a'i dyfraidd tawel ddaw o'r ffiol lawn, oes Hallelujah yn fy enaid I. Fe ddisychedwyd eich gwefusau crin a llyfiad sbwng yn nyddiau ola'r daith. A'i allwys can sy'n iawn mewn dyddiau blin, heb obaith I ni fyth liniaru'r graith. Lle cafwyd bedydd gynt a'ch braich yn gam, ma'ch meibion heddiw nôl ma'n reichion yn. A few tears sprinkled on your coffin lid, my soul. A few tears sprinkled on your coffin lid, my shoulders heaving as we hear this psalm. Hymn singing in your car was what we did before the wave of grief crashed through our calm. Should we submerge you in the faith and cry a noisy flood of tears to make us whole? Are we thus led the quiet waters by to find the hallelujah in our soul? To wet your lips when parched towards the end, a lick of sponge was all that we could give. Should we now pour out song that cannot mend the wounds that we must bear while we still live? Where you once held your babies to be blessed, your sons now hold your wife for your address.
Would you like me to invite any questions? Or, I mean, that was a very complete performance. That was a very rounded performance. So, Jonas.
One formal question. I realized that this last poem was a well-rhymed poem. Do you use rhyme in your original Welsh poetry as well? Is that
sometimes
the common thing to do? Is that the tradition?
I tend to use it more loosely. The poem from my dad was a sonnet, and I managed to sort of convey something fairly similar in the sonnet form in the English. Welsh traditional metre, which we had a workshop on yesterday, is certainly based around regular rhythm and rhyme.
Yeah.
And that's something I do to keep my hand in, but it wouldn't be my sort of go-to means of expression. Although it does trickle in and colour how I use language. It's a sort of part of the thought process certainly. But I find the regular rhyme can. Well, having said that, I've been writing more stuff with rhyme recently, so maybe I'm sort of coming back to it. I don't.
Apart from your rhyme poems, do you consider the English versions, are they translations or are they new versions of the same poem? Do you write them once again?
Well, I can do no better, if I may, than to read my thoughts on translation, because it answers it better than me waffling. But most of the translations I've done myself. Now then, poems become naked in translation. Teasing apart meaning and artifice sometimes reveals faults, what another translator might refer to more kindly as challenges in the original. The poet who translates his or her own work must be more critical, but he or she can also be more creative. So maybe I've been too creative with some of these translations. Are they trustworthy? Well, if you engage with translation to make your work known to a wider audience, then of course that's how, if you read these poems in Sweden, you're going to read them in English. Maybe one day in Welsh, but probably in English, or maybe in Swedish. But the target language becomes the language of the poem. the language of the target audience becomes the language of the poem. That is how they know it. So translation is not just an act of trust between the writer and the translator, but it also must be an act of trust between the translated work and the audience. And so, to answer the point in a very long-winded way, translation for me must be an act of poem making. In translation, we always have trade-offs, we always have compromises, the meaning, the music, the tone. They all need to be safeguarded, but they can never, or seldom, can they be satisfactorily reproduced. And then, of course, you have the keywords that have the layered meanings, like philoprastry, that sort of just flake away as you try and translate them. But we still try. Translating is like writing history. It should be contested and discussed, finessed, but never finished. Now that would be the ideal scenario, but of course, as with history, one version usually prevails, and for better or for worse, that's what's in the book.
Thanks.
Finessed but not finished.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Ifor, I'm going to close this Passion for Words because, for several reasons, the book fair will be closing at 2 o'clock. This event is closing at 2. The library will be closing. But I want to tell you a little bit more about the rest of the day's events.